Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Tom Miner, and we're going to be talking about his book, Social First Brands, How Modern Brands Create Community, Loyalty and Growth. Tom, what a fantastic book that you've written. Before we get into it, remind people where they can get hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at goldminermedia.com or I'm on LinkedIn as well, just at Tom Miner.
And just to say, it's my favorite book of the year, and partly because you tell a whole. It's for me. This is kind of like a working holiday because I work in social media, and you telling lots of things about social media, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in here which I thought, yeah, I never thought about that. So really appreciate that. So, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the high praise. It means a lot. I've obviously read your book several times myself. So inspiration really to me was just being social for years and years, and feeling like, this is, I think, core to a good chunk of us social media professionals who kind of understand true social first practices. But you get out there and you start talking to dozens and eventually hundreds of brands and businesses around the world, and you realize this stuff isn't as common sense or as established as maybe we can think it is. And so when I realized just how many conversations I was having with brand leaders all around the world, which I thought was kind of obvious things, realizing, wow, there's still a lot of room to educate and help kind of get this message out there. And so that kind of kicked off this process of how do I then, put a book together behind it. But really the inspiration, kind of practicing what I preach, was really all about that the audience, right? That consumer for me, which in this case are brand leaders, and realizing there was still kind of a need to get this message out there.
Because when you talk about social first, you're not actually meaning social media first, are you? This is well, what do you mean by social first?
Correct. Yeah. So my definition of social first is a little bit different than I think maybe the first working version, what I call social media 1.0, or lowercase social media, social first, as I refer to it in the book, which essentially was this concept of, okay, great, social media is here. We should probably stop trying to blast out landscape videos onto platforms that aren't optimized for that, and that kind of was this early working origins of it. But to me, it's so much bigger than just social media, right? It's really a way of connecting with consumers and getting people to talk about your brand. So I, referenced in the book too, but social media could go away tomorrow, and social first would still live on. So social media itself is just the means to an end.
Yeah.
Currently, it's our tool that we can use to connect with people around the world at a scale and a speed we've never been able to do before. But it won't always be that way. There'll be something in the future that supersedes or replaces what we call social media today, but the
Yep.
practices of the book will live on far beyond any social media channels.
Why do you think brands still treat social media as a broadcast channel rather than like a community building platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it kind of falls back into kind of those best practices that are can be pretty deeply entrenched. When social first came on the scene, right? I think brands took to it in a way that was a broadcast channel because it worked. Right, for the first several years of social, you could absolutely broadcast. The organic
And
reach
that
was
was what we were
wild.
used to from a
Mhm.
marketing perspective. We were used to standing on top of the building with a megaphone saying, "Buy my product because we're great."
Exactly. Yep. And you could get away with that in the early days for sure. And so I think that kind of best practice, that the habits got entrenched. So as social change, but more importantly, as consumer appetite change, the platform cultures change, brands did not keep up. So what happened was we're still living in this broadcast world, kind of a web 1.0 mentality of, hey, I have this message, I'm going to broadcast it out to you. We didn't really quite adapt to the two-way nature of social. Some brands obviously were early to into kind of led the way, if you will. But many brands, kind of got caught up in that obsession of it's KPI based. We have to get our message out there, we have to sell products, and so we use social just like we use every other channel in the game before there. And I think a lot of brands are still kind of stuck in that world, mostly through those again best practices or it's how we've always done things mindset.
Because one of the come to one of the diagrams now. One of the diagrams that you give is this one here, there we go. This one here, where you put the consumer in this. Well, got backwards because I'm a mirror. You put the consumer in the center, And it's not until you get to the brand at the top. So you say the consumer, then consumer interests, then consumer behavior, and then brands. And I assume this is the same in B2B as in B2C.
Absolutely. Yep. So that
Why is the
simple.
consumer the center of things and not the brand?
Yeah.
Sure, it's
Well,
privilege, Tom. Come on.
exactly, right? The mini
You
brands and the
heretic.
sacrilege. Right, exactly. So I think for the brands that still live in that brand first mentality, or a brand first brand as they're referred to in the book, that's still that I think just a common way of doing business. We fall in that trap that we think our thing is the most important thing, the most innovative thing out there, right? And so when we step into that like myopic marketer mind, we can kind of lose sight of like what actually matters and who that stakeholder is when it comes to social media or marketing, and even more broadly, and that is the consumer, right? If we can't reach them, get them to talk about our brands, what are we doing, right? So we are that self-centered, kind of that selfish POV that a brand has, which we know a consumer does not need to be told that a brand thinks their product is the best, that they think that the brand is the best. That is just a given before the consumer even reads your content. With that kind of flipping the model and putting the consumer at the center, it forces you to have to kind of work your brand backwards into the messaging, into the content. And so it seems like a simple flip, and it really kind of is. Not necessarily easy, but it is simple in nature of how do we take what the consumer is into, their interests, their behaviors, understanding at that level, we know what they're doing today. We know the types of things and how they're going to share content in text messages or closed DMs with friends, and then find a way that our brand is going to be interesting and relevant to that to get people talking about us. So it's kind of just like the Trojan horse, if you will, but it starts with really that deep understanding of the consumer and that they have to be placed at the center for that to work.
Next diagram, which I loved, is this one here, which is the fact that we've moved from a social graph to an interest graph. And that's exactly how, if you think about the way that we use social media, what happened was that we connected with friends. This is going, 15, 20 years ago, we connected with friends. Now what we do, we're interested in people because of what they're sharing is of interest. And I was on a call with LinkedIn today where LinkedIn said, if people are sharing rubbish on your timeline, just unfollow them. So to talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a massive change in social at large. So really, if you think about like trends in general, right, that's kind of a buzzword, obviously, but there's kind of three different layers and nuances to trends. And so one of those is like what TikTok would refer to as a moment. So think of like last year around this time, when we had the very demure, very mindful trend, all these brands were jumping into. That was a moment, right? It's kind of a creative prompt that pops up and then fizzles out quickly. TikTok kind of identifies two more layers of trends, which I think it's a really smart framework. And the second one is a signal. So that's usually like something's kind of an emerging interest or an emerging behavior. And so that's really important for brands to pay attention to. But the third and final one is the most long lasting. And that's what they call a force. And so in this example of algorithms going from the kind of that social approach to interest based is a massive force in social, right? It's something that will impact the next decade plus. And really what's happening is it takes, again, us marketers and brand leaders to take a step back and realize, wow, if we thought maybe it was already hard in the past to get people to care about our messaging, it's going to be harder now because these algorithms are designed not even around the follow anymore. So really, it's going to be about the consumer interest, again, putting the consumer back at the center. Not only is it brands that need to do this, but the algorithms themselves have done this, right? Because now it's this personalized, individualized feed that's based off your individual interests. So we're all going to have very different experiences online when we open our apps because these algorithms are designed to serve our individual interests. And rarely is that going to be a brand or an ad or something that's trying to get somebody to take action, right? Those are not the reasons or the things that we're interested into in our lives. So therefore, those are the things that we're going to try to avoid on our social feeds.
Right. I now want to talk to you about community. And people watching this will go, yeah, we got a community. Tim, I'm not interested at this point. And I'm going to say, according to Tom, you haven't got a community. Because what you say, community, This is like going to a concert, a movie, or a play. You don't just sit around talking with attendees and swap content and information after the credits roll. After the credits drop, you walk away. So you describe that people think they have a community, but it's actually just like going to the cinema or going to a concert. People form in a sit there and they consume the content, but once the show's over, they walk away. There isn't actually any interaction between the people. And this is whereas a lot of people think that they've got a community, they haven't. I think I've waffled a bit there. So you explain it because you wrote it.
Yeah, that I did. But no, it's a really good point. And I think community is one of the most abused terms in marketing, and just in business in general, to be honest. Right, there's a stat that I came across as writing the book that about 30% of startup founders today think that their competitive moat is community, which is kind of wild because trying to like launch with this understanding or this dream that you're gonna have a community from day one is very far-fetched because again, we're misunderstanding what community truly is. So in the past, I think what we maybe called community was probably more akin to a following or even maybe an audience. It's maybe some degree of people who are consuming our content. In the movie analogy, from to the movie theater, they're buying tickets to come see our movie or they're coming to see the play. Once the curtain drops and that's over, we're not sitting there in the audience talking with each other. We're not swapping notes, feedback from what we just watched. We leave, we go home to our actual communities, right? And so I think we got that kind of framework backwards, right? We think of this audience as following, conflating that with community. Community is very difficult to have, and I think sometimes the more chest beating I see out there of a CEO or a CMO saying, "Oh, it's our community that makes everything possible." 9 times out of 10, they don't have a community because community is very hard to pinpoint and very hard to create and maintain. And so I think with a true community, right, you have to have a few criteria in place. And the book obviously goes into detail on this. But one of the things I think it's really important for a true community experience is, yes, some degree of dialogue and shared experiences amongst the people who are actually at the movie theater in this analogy. But also, too, you need some degree of rules and participation requirements. And so I think a really interesting origins in social media, at least, is like the term community management. Right. I think for many years we viewed this term or this profession as coming in there and really just moderating comments. Right. So we think it's a big deal to like respond to somebody. And I think that's just like common courtesy. That's such low table stakes. It's definitely not a community. And so I think, too, if you look back into like massive online video games like World of Warcraft, right, some of the early origins of like actual online communities, they'd form self-organizing guilds around these things. You had to live up to a certain standard or level to be part of this guild. The guild leaders then would represent you to the community manager who worked for these games. So I think, again, that level of community, it's usually backwards or usually wrong. And realizing the level to do that, typically it won't happen in the marketing department. You need to have more of a it's a business strategy. It has to be baked into the culture of the company to eat, breathe, and sleep community.
Yeah. So my next question was, how do we turn an audience, which is what most people have got, into a community?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, and a lot of love. And so, I think for that term community to be a true community, an audience, right, already takes time to build, as we know. It takes really great content typically to start that. You have to have good enough content where people want to show up and kind of continually consume your content. That would be my definition of an audience. Versus the follower might not necessarily want to watch your stuff consistently. So a little bit different. But to go from the audience to that community leap, again, that's going to take time. It's also going to take resourcing and understanding of what the audience wants, right? So I think too, if you think of like social first is putting that consumer kind of the center of everything, to take that next evolution into community, usually, this person's already going to have consumed your content, bought your product. They're kind of already in your marketing funnel. So you don't need to throw first time messaging them ever again. They know who you are, they like you, they trust you, right? So they want something deeper and more meaningful from you now, or from their fellow community members, right? And so to get them there, typically that's going to be a lot more of a place for them to, again, self-organize. And so whether that's like a Discord channel or there's different Slack channels, etc., tech tools we can use to like organize them. And that's totally fine, but it really has to become that self-organizing facet. And that's going to be kind of the shared language, the shared brand lore, those elements that these other consumers know and love and can talk to their other fellow fans about their shared love
Yeah.
of your brand.
So who do you see doing it well?
Yeah. So there's, I think, a couple examples. One of my favorite ones, though, just because they're a little bit of a younger brand. Sometimes we point to like the big established guys. Is a brand called Topicals. They've only been around for a handful of years. They're a skincare brand that's done a fantastic job of building community. If you go to their website, you can actually just Google Topicals community, and they have 3 different like tiers or levels that you can be part of, depending if you're more of an influencer, are you a super fan, or are you just somebody who wants that early access. You can tell your friends and family about the great things that Topical is up to. They're doing some cool stuff there, but if you drill a little bit deeper into how they're actually executing on community, I went to LinkedIn when I was writing the book as a curiosity to search their job postings. I saw a handful of just community blank, and I thought it was fascinating. I see so many community title jobs for a pretty young emerging company. Again, a little bit drilling deeper, it turns out they have a community director who's kind of a C-level position at the brand, who came from kind of community grassroots organizing background. I thought that was pretty amazing, right? You took somebody who's a true community builder, not necessarily a marketer trying to like slap the term community onto an audience, who's kind of walked this talk and lived this journey, and kind of brought that ethos into the company. And so now they'll do cool things with like, community trips. Instead of sending influencers somewhere fun, they'll send their community members out there. So I think that they're a really cool example. And again, if they're a smaller emerging brand can do that, right? There's no reason why more companies can't be really walking that true community path.
And do you see anybody in the business to business area doing it?
Yeah, I think it's a bigger example, but like HubSpot, I think over the years has been pretty well known for having community. Right, their inbound conference, you get pretty well, I think, like entrenched into a little bit more of a social first. Their social media comes across a little bit more like a B2C business, and so I think that kind of community ethos is a pretty good example of what HubSpot's doing there.
Mm. Yeah, they're very social. So, I mean, one of the criticisms that I think that leaders still give, certainly one of the criticisms that I see from leaders that is that social is just basically you're just playing on social media. I actually know of a sales leader that reckons that the reason why the IT industry has basically gone down over the last couple of years is because all the salespeople spend all their time on social media, just playing around, not doing anything. And so as a leader, what can I expect from being social first? Does this mean that everybody plays on social and I make no money?
Right. It's right. It's a good question and a normal fear, I think, too. It's kind of funny. There was some research published by the consulting firm Deloitte in 2023, I believe it was, where they looked at social first brands versus what they call less mature social brands. So my analogy, kind of like a brand first brand. They actually found out that social first brands have 10.2% year-over-year annual growth rate, and they are 8 times more likely to exceed revenue goals by 25% or more. So I think it's like it starts with that business mindset. So I think we should be thinking dollars and cents into revenue because
Yep.
social first isn't fun and games. Yes, there's some fun stuff involved, but it ultimately builds your brand better than other strategies. And it's as we can see through some of these stats too, it does lead to that bottom line impact that business leaders, sales leaders are looking for. However, with that said, it absolutely comes with patience and time, right? Because we're not just blasting out brochures and trying to sell people day one and trying to get that kind of direct response marketing. This stuff does take months and oftentimes years to really be effective. So if your mindset as a sales leader, as that your team is just, messing around on social and wasting time and having fun, then yeah, you're never able to pull it off, right? Because you haven't truly understood what it takes to get there. So yes, the payoff is there, right? We know that social first brands tend to outgrow and outpace non-social first, companies and organizations. At the same time, though, it's not for everybody. As I called out in the book, if your goal right now is, hey, we need to convert somebody tomorrow, then yeah, like absolutely, don't worry about this stuff. Keep doing what you're doing, right? Try to throw ads up and try to just, hopefully your pipeline's big enough where you can get that one conversion you're looking for. But it is that longer game. If you're trying to do something more meaningful, again, because this is consumers first, you have to build that relationship, and that's not going to come with just trying to beat somebody over the head with a sales message.
So, what about the future, Tom? Where are we going to go with social media, do you think?
I wish I knew. Yeah, I'd be on the yacht somewhere having this conversation. A couple of theories, though. I think of where things are headed next are. We are going to see. I think it's pretty widely out there at this point. It's not the first one to say it, but it's fragmentation of social.
Yeah.
So we'll see more niche platforms, more niche areas for consumers to go to. The world in general seems to be fragmenting more, and so I think
Yeah.
social just mirrors our IRL world as well. And so I think that's absolutely going to play out, which is really exciting in some ways too, because it won't necessarily just be the monoliths anymore. I think we're going to see some new energy coming in over the next few years into social, some other platforms. I think consumers and society and culture at large, there's starting to be some burnout on some of these platforms. And so I think it's going to be ripe for some new players, some fresh ways for us to both create content and consume it. And so I'm really excited to see kind of what pops up there. The other kind of bigger change to long term, I think, is going to be, next 5 to 10 years, will be this return almost more so than like some futuristic, state, which is really going to be human first, a lot of humanity, right? AI is already here. It's only going to get noisier and louder than ever in the history of our internet or our world. And so I think the brands that can really embody social first, be incredibly human, build actual communities, not just audiences. Those are going to be the winners. And so I think we're going to see more and more investment happening into actual communities through social.
Excellent. Tom, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, Social First Brands: How Modern Brands Create Community, Loyalty, and Growth. As I say, I love the book. It's my favorite book of this year. If I wanted to buy a copy, where can I get a copy from?
Yep. So Amazon's got it. You can go to barnesandnoble.com if you're in the States.
Koganpage.com. Yeah.
Koganpage.com. Yep. Has it as well. So, yep. A few different options in it too. If you're looking for a little promo code from Kogan Page directly, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I can provide that.
Okay. So if they shoot you a DM, you can get a promo code from Kogan Page.
Yep.
Tom,
correct.
where can we find you?
Yep. So LinkedIn is where I do most of my social meanderings. Then again, my website's goldminermedia.com.
Excellent. Tom, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for the book.